Hello, welcome to Prism Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 2 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss about how to determine what version of ASP.NET MVC is being used by an existing MVC application. In part 1 of this video series, we discussed about different MVC versions that are available as of today. We have MVC2, MVC3 and MVC4. Now let's say on my computer I have several existing ASP.NET MVC applications. Now how do I determine which version of MVC is being used by each of these applications? That's what we are going to discuss in this video. Now let's flip to Visual Studio. Let's create an MVC application. So click on File, New, Project, and let's select MVC2 Web Application, and let's name it MVC2 Application. Click OK, and it's going to ask you whether you want to create a unit test project. For now, I'm going to say no, do not create a unit test project. Click OK. It's going to create an MVC2 application for us. Now let's go to the other Visual Studio that's open, and now let's select File, New, Project, and then now let's select MVC3 Web Application, and let's name it MVC3 Application. Click OK. Now select the template, an empty template, and then the view engine as Razor View Engine. We'll talk about what are these view engines in a later video session. So click OK. Now let's go to the other Visual Studio which is open, and let's create another project, and this time let's create an MVC4 application, and let's call this MVC4 application. Click OK, select empty template and Razor View Engine. Click OK. So now we have 3 MVC applications on my computer. Now if you look at the name, it's called MVC2 application, but in reality we wouldn't name our applications as such. We would give them more meaningful names depending on what they do, but here, just for our identification, we have given it as MVC2 application. But just imagine if this application were to use a different name, then how do I tell which version of MVC was used to build this application? We can do it in 2 ways. We can identify that at design time. If you want to identify that at design time, what you can do is go to Solution Explorer, expand References folder, and then within References folder you should see something called system.web.mvc. Right click on that and select Properties, and look at the version of MVC here, 2, which means we have used MVC2 to build this MVC application. Similarly, if I go to MVC3 application, look at that MVC3 application, and then if I go to References folder and then look at system.web.mvc, go to the Properties, look at that version is 3. And then if I go to MVC4 application, expand References folder, system.web.mvc, right click on that, go to Properties, look at the version, it's 4. So we know how to figure that out at design time. Now if I want to achieve that programmatically, is that possible? Absolutely. And this is how you do that. You use reflection. So you look at the controller. We'll talk about controllers in detail in a later video session, but I can use something called controller in MVC, model view controller. C is controller. So controller, and get the type of it, and then dot, I use the assembly property and invoke get name function, and then dot version is going to give you the version of MVC that was used to build this application. And to quickly identify that, let's go to, for example, this MVC2 application here. Look at this. At the moment, this controller action method, this index function, which within this home controller class is returning action result, but for now let's say it's going to return a string. We'll talk about these controller action methods in a very great detail in a later video session. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say return, and then I'm going to use that code that you have seen on the slide, controller, and then I'm going to get the type of that, so type of controller, and then it's type of dot, we can get the assembly dot get name, and then dot version. Look at that, and then convert that to string. That's it. So if I go ahead and run this now. When the web application renders, it should show me the version of MVC that was used to build this application, and that's at runtime. So the web form is loading. We can do that with MVC3 and MVC4 applications as well, the same code, no difference. Let's quickly do it for MVC3. If you look at MVC3 application, at the moment you don't have any controllers in the folder, so we need to add a controller. We'll talk about controllers in a great detail in our next video session. So I'm going to say add controller, and let's call it home controller, and that should add a controller class and a function within that. And look at that, I have this index function, and similarly I'm going to return a string, and I'm going to go to our MVC2 application, copy the same code from there, and then paste it within this function. Alright, now let's run this. So we are running MVC3 application. We have already run MVC2. Look at that, it has written 2 as the version. So for MVC3 it's returning 3. If you put the similar code in MVC4 application, it should state it as MVC4. So if you want to figure out what version is being used by an existing MVC applications, there are two ways. You can either do it at design time or programmatically at runtime. Alright, on this slide you